it I mean, any thought of being complacent was immediately abolished after that. The hardest part was dealing with the rage, the local community towards the local community. Not all of them deserved it. Maybe none of them deserved it. So you had to really push all that down and get through that. Just do your job while your best friend is in a morgue somewhere.
And three, two, one. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, going up to high school and before you joined the military.
All right. So growing up, pre-military life was bounced all over. I actually born and for the most part raised in Canada until my teenage years, and when I was 8 years old, started moving around every year to 2 years. Split family. My mom did everything she could to really sustain us. From there, she met my stepdad. I was 11 at the time. Just entered Scouts up in Canada. They ended up getting married a year later, and then my stepdad moved down to Seattle and brought me and my mom with him. My sisters chose to stay with my biological dad up in Canada. Um, from there, I was the new kid. I was the Canadian. I was kind of made fun of the entire time, and and I don't know if it was a typical. Looking back on it, I don't know if it was a typical high school example. I think that I have lots of negative looks on high school. Uh, I was definitely smaller kid, picked on, new kid. Even when we moved down here, I ended up switching schools frequently. Like every year, it seemed like I was in a new school. So my circle of friends was very limited. I didn't necessarily fit in with any clique, and I was desperate for friends, to be honest. I was willing to do anything, including sacrifice my grades uh, or time, I guess. Grades was a recourse of that. Test scores were through the roof, but homework and those type of educational scores were below grade. So coming to the end of high school, I didn't have any college prospects. And I mean, during that time, just to where I found interest in the military was since I kind of reclused myself, the History Channel back when it actually had history and important facts on it. It was following the 9/11 attack and the follow on, and being bullied during that time. I think really shaped my choices in my life from going forward up to this point. Because I mean, I was raised on the History Channel, learning about all different branches, different operations, and just what their capabilities was, and being picked on. I was told I was too little, too small, too weak, too dumb to do anything, and I fell in love with the Marine Corps. uh, I've always had the attitude of if if I'm told I can't do it, it's kind of one of those hold my beer. It's going to happen. I've always taken it as a challenge per se, um, and so my senior year in high school, jumping back to that, when I had no prospects at college, when all my friends were getting their acceptance letters and all that, or yeah, friends, acquaintances, students, fellow students, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I signed up for the Marine Corps during that time. With that, I was only 17 at the time. Canada, we actually started a year early for school, so I was young for my senior year, and this was would have been '05, the '04 or '05 graduating year. And I slipped in the age waiver after I talked to the recruiter into a bunch of school documents and got my stepdad to sign them. Um, I was a latchkey kid. My mom was gone taking care of my grandmother who was sick. So he just signed it blindly. And when my mom found out, I mean, shit hit the fan. Um, Immediately, the recruiter was called, scolded by my mother, which I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that. Even after seeing what what you go to become that, I still wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of it. And from there, she actually took me up to my dad's house up in Canada, and I spent the summer with him to avoid me getting shipped off. So she essentially removed me from the situation, so I couldn't ship off into the Marine Corps. And that's up to high school. I didn't join straight out of high school either. From there was another 3 years, and that was kind of my figuring out what did I want to do, and all of it always led back to the Marine Corps. So that's kind of where high school and early life drove me to the choice of joining the military, and more specifically the Marine Corps.
Can you tell me a little bit about when the time came that you made the final decision to join the Marine Corps, and what it was that drew you specifically to the infantry?
So what drew me to the Marine Corps was 9/11. Ninth grade, Miss Thompson social study class. I sat in the back left, like I remember it to this day. Her son was actually supposed to be in that building that day when it happened. Now, being on the West Coast, we heard about it. I don't know the exact time, but I know my class schedule, and it stuck with me to this point. I think that was the deciding. I didn't know it then, but that was the deciding factor. I was going to join the Marine Corps, and then from there, it came back to I watched one buddy join the Navy right out of high school, and I had 3 years to figure my stuff out. I tried college for a year, and so on and so forth. Second year out of high school, my other buddy, he joined the Navy, and every time I thought about joining the military, it was that's too easy, that's too easy, that's too easy. And then I ended up talking to the Marine Corps recruiter because I already talked to him once and let him know the whole situation, that I depped in, but I didn't actually go if that was going to be problems. He worked with me through it. It was just the self-motivation of, once again, the History Channel. Who's the first one in? Who's going to be the ones that make the biggest difference? Now, I'm not saying that the other branches don't make a big difference. They absolutely do. I have respect for all branches, but I guess when I was younger, I was tainted in the idea that the Marine Corps, the first in, last out attitude always stuck with me, and I didn't want to be second place, and that's how I viewed it. Naive child that I was, but so, and then I mean, watching what was the show, Mail Time with Gunny Ermey, I want to say his name was. It was, he always talked about the Marines, the Marine infantry, so on and so forth. The hard training they went through, the suffrage they went through, the missions that they ran, and I mean, that was it. There was no choice. Once I chose the Marine Corps to me was the infantry. It wasn't later until I figured out that only 10% of the Marine Corps was actually frontline workers, and it took nine others to support one infantryman or one frontline person. But as soon as I made my choice up on the Marine Corps, infantry was the only way I went. When I took the ASVAB, scores went through the roof. When they found out I wasn't a citizen, I was just on a green card, that limited my options. They tried to put me in for intel or counter intel, extra testing. Those didn't go through because I wouldn't have had the clearance right out of boot camp. At first, I mean, this is the surge. This was early 2008, where numbers are drawing up. Recruiters have quotas to fill, and when it came to the Marine Corps, infantry was always full. After 6 months of going back and forth with my recruiter, him offering me motor T, S1, all these other non-infantry positions, tanker. I mean, tankers do work, but seeing what the war was, they weren't really doing work from what I could tell. So after 6 months of this back and forth with him, I essentially went into his office one day when he said he has a contract for me. And he's like, well, I have this one, but I want to save it. And, he ended up dragging me in, trying to get me to sign a different contract. At which point I walked across the hall or to the next office building, whatever it was at the time, and talked to an Army guy. He said, you want to be infantry? You've already done your ASVAB. You've done your medical, all that other good stuff. We can have you out here in 2 months. I said, okay, I'll be right back. Went back to my recruiter, Staff Sergeant Hall. And I told him, you got 2 months. or you have less than 2 months. Army's getting me out of here. I'm ready to sign their paperwork. Later that day, he had my contract, signed it, and then 2 weeks later, so all this happened right as I turned 21 in October. 2 weeks later, I was shipping off to boot camp, and that was I want to say October 18th, 2008. So, I mean, everything always just drove me to the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps was only infantry for me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your initial experience in the Marine Corps and the time leading up to your first combat tour?
Yeah. So my time in the Marine Corps, leading up to my first combat tour, which was my first deployment. I mean, I went through boot camp. It's a different experience for everybody. I actually enjoyed it. Yeah, I learned how to embrace the suck, if you would, really, really quick. Learn how to. I even then I've been able to thrive in chaos. No notable stories per se. I didn't fly under the radar. I ended up getting meritorious out of boot camp, but I would say it was earned. From there, I went to SOI, and all this was done on the West Coast. So it was San Diego, Hollywood Marine. Went to SOI West Coast at Camp Pendleton in the 51 area, SOI area, whatever it's called. And the structure for that is the first half is your standard infantry. From there, I was actually an O3 open contract. So that allowed me the option I wasn't designated O311. So halfway through the School of Infantry, what they do is they take volunteers for different MOSs: O341 mortarman, O331 machine gunner, and O351, which is assaultman, and O352, which was tow gunners. Tow gunners was out of the question. It was closed out. Assaultmen, I think they took two of them, and they took the two volunteers that had the highest test scores and overall performance scores, so they got their pick. 41s, 31s, there's a couple people that volunteered, but nobody really liked the idea of sitting behind the front line with the mortarmen, so a couple people got voluntold for that. Machine gunners was the only one that spoke to me per se. That being said, I dreaded the fact of carrying over my body weight. At the time, I think it was about 120, 130 pounds. The Modus, the 50 cal, it weighs 148 pounds total system. And you break that up into three different pieces: 44 pounds for the tripod, 28 pounds for the barrel. That scared the hell out of me, but I could always hike. I've always felt that the bigger guys, the ones that have it easy when it comes to hiking, don't actually understand what hard it takes to persevere. And so when I was voluntold for machine gunners, I wasn't upset about it. I actually think it was the best choice that the Marine Corps made for me. From there, pretty standard. Fell in love with machine guns. It's hard not to. Then we get picked up by our unit. I went to 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. It was about 3 miles down the road in Horno. So there was 5 of us, I want to say, machine gunners that were going to 3-1. Oh, there was a lot more than 5, sorry. There was 5 of us that were going to India Company, which is the one I wound up in, weapons platoon, which wasn't a truck company, so no 50 cal, but it did mean hauling the 240 all day, every day. That was going to be the new love of my life. Richard Moore, him and I met during SOI. He was a cycle behind or in front of me in boot camp, but him and I kind of became best friends. Him and I went to India, and I mean, by today's definition, it would be considered hazing. But my seniors immediately started implementing the knowledge that we had to have and the physical conditioning that we had to have. My direct seniors, so the people that had just come back from their first deployment, they ended up doing the 31st MEU, which is spending most of their time in Okinawa. They talked about it, they did some great training over there. We were a boat company at the time, so they suffered. They did jungle warfare training, and as it is, you pass down, as a senior Marine, you pass down that knowledge, and whatever they could pass down to us, they did. Their senior Marines, some of them were Fallujah vets. 3-1 was active participant in that, and actually one of my good friends today, um, he was in that push, and so I mean, 2 seniors above me, everybody's somebody's boot, but he kind of took me under his wing. He never talked at me aggressively. He understood I was older, which was a whole different aspect of it too. Most kids, and I call them kids, I still think they were, and I was too at the time, were 18, 19 years old. I was 21. My senior Marines were 19 to 21. I was being asked to go and buy them beer. I mean, it's different being older, but being treated junior, because they can't selectively choose to treat specific junior Marines differently. So I got bundled in with the 18-year-olds. I didn't fit. Story of my life, it was very few friends. I mean, I did my work, but I definitely wasn't in the inside circle, if you'd call it. And part of that I put on me. There are different aspects of that of the social culture that are completely important to the unit cohesion. In regards to unit cohesion, absolutely think I fit in with my unit, but the drinking buddies I didn't. But training from there, lots of hiking, lots of physical training. I was looked down upon by my peers and my seniors because I wasn't necessarily strong. I couldn't bench as much as them. I couldn't squat as much as them, but I never fell out of a hike. Never fell back from a hike. The 2 senior Marines that were involved in training me directly, my fire team, they failed. They were short timers. They just wanted to do their time, and I was a nuisance. So whenever it came to them doing, they shrugged their responsibilities down on me, and I suffered for it. I went many hours without sleep in training evolutions when we were out in the field. And it's not to say that junior Marines don't kind of get the shit end of the stick. It's one of the things that more so than my peers. All my other peers were two of my peers to a fire team, so 2 of my peers to 1 senior, whereas I had 2 seniors to me. We ended up doing high altitude training in Bridgeport, California, and that's when it really struck me that my seniors were just shrugging their responsibilities. We'd hike, I don't know, miles a day. Elevation change is just ridiculous. If you've done it, it's hard to explain the level of exhaustion you have. And then every night we'd set up some type of defense, and machine gunners had to always man their posts. So it would be 4 hours on for me, and then if we were in a defense for the day, and this was kind of general throughout all the training we did, I'd be on post all day, or doing the patrols all day. When I'd come back, I'd have first post, and then my senior Marines would take 2-hour shifts, so 4 hours for me for rest, and then I'd be back on, and I might get 2 or 3 hours at the end of that to before I had to start my day. But most of the time I was working off of 4 hours of sleep in a training environment. And I mean, there was one point out in Bridgeport where I was quite literally hallucinating from exhaustion. Doc had to sit me down, rehydrate me, and basically tell me I'm resting all day. So that it got a little weird there. But I mean, the training was great. The unit put on great training. It was definitely know your system. Become your firearms are an extension of your body. Know what their capabilities are. Know how to implement them. And I've always been good with numbers. Been good with books. That part was easy. Understanding, all the acronyms, learning it all. That was easy. I always felt that I was trying to earn the respect of not just my peers, but my seniors as well, and prove to myself that I belonged there. And that was just an everyday battle for me, for up until our first deployment. So, and then it even got where I found true unit cohesion is actually leading up to our deployment. Normally, weapons platoon would be separated into each separate platoon. So each platoon would get a squad of support of machine guns. But what they ended up doing is they turned us into a 4th platoon. And then they integrated all 3 platoons plus weapons as a platoon. So we weren't working with our weapons platoon, with our mortarments, with our machine gunners. We were actually completely embedded into other platoons. And from there, I always got along great with the Crunchies, with the 11s, the I hate saying the term, but basic riflemen. And that's I had my squad, and one of my squad mates, him and I went off roading. Another one, I mean, the seven of us got along well enough. The squad leader, um, he he had our respect, and he knew how to push us, sometimes too hard, but he didn't necessarily fit in with us. I don't know if it was intentional, but he was ousted by the group of us. But the core of the squad I worked with on my first deployment absolutely was the experience I wish I got from my weapons platoon. And leading up first deployment 2010 Afghanistan. We're flying into country, getting ready to fly into country. Half of our battalion takes off, transatlantic flight. I'm waiting. I'm in the second half flight, and the Icelandic volcano goes off. So we're stationary for 2 weeks, and the worst thing you can have is bored Marines. I swear by that. So for 2 weeks, we had to show up every morning. Formation. Hey, we're not flying today. Check back in. Phone tree. Come in. Stand on parade deck at this time. But we did that for 2 weeks, and eventually we ended up, going out and rejoining the rest of our battalion. So.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your deployment.
All right. So 2010, it was a longer workup, but 2010, Icelandic volcano goes off. Advon's over there, first half of the battalion. We ended up catching up with them 2.5 weeks later, I think it was. By that time, they had already done their acclimatization to the desert weather. We get thrown, I want to say I was from Kuwait, don't know the exact base, but basically 2 weeks of additional local training, customs, extra stuff, ROE training, acclimatization to the fun weather that you're going to have over there, the dry heat. So 2 weeks there, nothing spectacular. Great food though. I will say their mid rats were on point. French toast sticks, never forget those. From there, we ended up, I wanted to say, jumped on a C-130, and we took a quick flight over to Camp Delhi. Don't know how much time we spent there. A day or two, I want to say. From there, we went to Camp Dwyer, and once again, not that much time in Camp Dwyer. We jumped on up armored Armadillo 7 tons, and we got trucked out. That's where we started dropping off different guys at the patrol bases. So our company patrol base was Cop Sharp. Further down the road, we had 2 main supply routes, MSRs, Cowboys and Dolphins, that had an intersection. Right at that Y intersection, on the inside of the Y, there was PB Hand. That's where I was first at. So me, our squad, get off there instantly. We do our introductions with the unit we're relieving. I can't remember if it's 2-1 or 1-1. But they give us a walk around to this compound. Why it's important. It's 2 main MSRs, kind of 2 ways into our area of operation, and then kind of the region that they tour. And this is all before we even bother to step out of the wire. Dirt and stick type of map. Let us know about the different tribes, because it was a very tribal land. It was farmland. I mean, at the end of the day, it was farmland. We were 5 clicks away from a local bazaar. And then they filled us in on some of the customs that would later shock us. Because it's hard, it's easy to hear something, but it's hard to understand something and see it in real life. So after that, we started doing our RIP, which is, they send out, both squads will send out however many guys they can, plus whoever stays back on post, so we can, do the handshake with the locals that they've built a reputation with. That goes fine. We kind of get into the history when they first got there. every patrol they did, it was, they were taking pop shots from certain buildings, and, where there were no IEDs, but EOD wasn't in the area, stay away from there until we have it. Careful, because certain people are double dealing, but we can't catch them, so it's not a matter of wrapping them up. With that, we also, so I mean, this is all going on within a week, 2 weeks of this transitionary period. And we got to get to know our our Afghan National Army partners, who we worked with throughout the entire deployment. We weren't introduced to the Afghan National Police, the ANP, until I'd say about a month, 2 months until the end of our deployment. Then 7 tons came and picked them up, and that was surreal for me. That was the oh shit moment. No more hand holding. Training has to kick in. This is our job. Our QRF is 10 mics away if they can gear up on time. If they don't hit an IED, we're kind of, 7 guys I absolutely trust with 4 or 5 Afghan nationals, Army, to support us living in this compound. And we started work. I mean, the idea is, win over the hearts and minds. Velvet glove, iron fist type of mentalities was really breached to us. Absolutely win the locals over. That's how we get more information. That's how we pacify areas. Is we show people that we're good to work with. And so we started doing that. And I'd say it took a month, even though we did the handshakes with the previous guys. It took about a month before we really started building those relationships. We started having our key leader engagements, KLEs. We'd set those up, but the locals didn't want to be seen talking to us. So lots of those took place midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, it's not a 9 to 5. Everybody knows the military's not a 9 to 5, but you had to rotate on post. You had to go on patrols. We were averaging 3 patrols a day, anywhere from 5 to 15 clicks. Not to say I was necessarily I wasn't on all of them, but, switching between that and post, trying to get a sleep cycle in there. I knew what I signed up for, but you can't expect it till you live it. And about a month into it, I mean, the big fear was IEDs. And being that we were on 2 MSR avenues, we were always keeping an outlook on that intersection. About a month into it, we seen 2 farmers. They were digging in the trench right next to the road. And we went out and talked to them. Middle of the day, kind of not necessarily unusual behavior, but suspicious, we'll call it. Went and talked to them, and they were just letting us know they're unclogging a culvert so they can get irrigation into their field. That was fine, but what made it bad was our chain of command. They spotted on GBOS, which is high-power camera that can zoom in, and so they were up at Cop Sharp, or PB Amir, which is another, like a secondary cop for us, which was a couple miles south. But they noticed that they were digging there. They couldn't see it, so they told us to go out and investigate. This is already after we had, and to roll them up, so bring them in for questioning. We tried to explain that we talked to them. That didn't work. So, you do as you're told. Chain of command, we went up, we rolled them up, we apologized to them. I was actually on post at that time. So I don't know what was said, but I do know that, they weren't zip tied or nothing like that. They came willingly, they just, whatever. And we were given a set of questions. Our interpreter, Abib, he did a great job asking the questions, interpreting and kind of conveying the message that we were trying to get across. But the problem was the locals that witnessed us bringing them in had a problem with that. And I'd say 20 to 30 minutes of us bringing them in for questioning, there was a mob of about 60 plus people, we'll call it, standing outside of our front gates. Now, these compounds that we're in, we didn't have HESCO barriers. We took over essentially what is a mud house that has a mud wall around it. And we sandbag up certain positions, but when you're looking at 60 people, you get a little nervous. I don't care what your training is, and they're getting rowdy. You're trying to calm them down. Our interpreters out there trying to calm them down, but there has to be a level of safety, and that was a constant battle, is understanding their boundaries and what helped us feel safe, and when to switch to, okay, we're no longer safe. When does the aggression kick in? And that was my first real encounter of having to. I mean, I wasn't part of it, but having to see a de-escalation go on and be part of the security that's holding all that, and it makes you question some people's choices, like the chain of command. They didn't want to believe us, but I mean, I can only say this because it's been years and I've thought about it so many times. But why didn't they take us at face value? We have to take them at face value. Why didn't our chain of command take us at face value? That's just one experience, but it really led to what I later discovered in life as my inability to trust anybody, loss of trust of even my closest friends. And it wasn't just that one situation; it was multiple. Um, I mean, that first month, kind of going back, as we were talking about getting the trust of the locals, before they would actually talk to us. And then in the following month and a half, we actually just had a great idea: set up a local school. And you have 300 kids in our AO, roughly 300, 600 kids, whatever it was. I know it was a lot, um, that had no opportunity of school. And if you don't have education, my opinion, you're bound to repeat history. If you don't know about it, if you don't have any better choices, you're going to do the same thing. This area was known for growing heroin, black tar heroin, opiates. We tried to push that out by giving them corn, which was a profitable crop. So my mom, I wrote her a letter, said, hey, we're trying to set up a school. Can you send me a list of supplies? Box after box after box. My mom was a trooper. And all of it went to building the school. Now, I talked about how their tribes over there, their cultures, and they were absolutely different. We had three very distinct communities. One community was the farmers, 100% farmers. The next community was the shop owners, and the third one was the smallest one, but the doctors, the higher educated, if you will, the people that moved, like went away, got an education, and moved back. These cultures didn't talk to each other at all, and our school was the tool that brought them together. So as we're getting all the supplies, squad leaders going ahead, coordinating with our command, coordinating with different key leader engagement, saying, hey, we want to help you. So the educated group, obviously, they were the prime target for the teachers. So we talked to them, let them know the store owners, they had the property, they had the buildings. We asked if we could use one of the local buildings that was abandoned but owned by one of them to set up a school. And then the farmers, help with the physical resources of setting everything up, getting everything into shape, because they had the manpower and the tools to do it, building bridges, access, that type of stuff. And it really came together. By the end of it, we set up our school and it was successful. Kids that have never had an opportunity at school, I'd say about 100 a day, every day we went there, had a chance to learn. And even to this day, when people ask me what happened in my military career, that's the one thing I always try to highlight, because that was the good that came out of it. Giving children who are absolutely innocent a chance to thrive at life, which that talked earlier about being told something and witnessing it. The part of their culture can only be described as evil. You would, on market days especially, but throughout patrols, you would see a group of guys traveling in their big merchant trucks, overload or whatever. 7 to a dozen guys, trying to make a living. That's fine, but the part that's disturbing is that they would always have a young boy with them. Age varies, but usually between 6 and 12. They'd dress them up. They'd throw iodine in their hair because they thought it was cute. Their hands were iodine, so they were orange. They'd have very fancy clothes, and a child was brought there for their physical needs, I guess. And I mean, it's just evil to witness that. And knowing that that's part of their culture, we were told there's nothing we can do, and that was the worst, having your hands tied and seeing that happen. And it wasn't just a one-off case. Every Friday was Bazaar Day, so being two routes going by our position, we'd set up a search post. So we'd stop pretty much either random or pretty much everybody coming in, and every Friday or at least once a week, we were exposed to this culture that, I mean, I can't even begin to fathom how they justify it. And it's it's just evil. That still haunts me to this day. Knowing that there's nothing I could do and knowing that it's still going on. Um, so, just sorry. Carrying on from kind of setting up that school. That's From there, we ended up getting relieved at our patrol base. We moved to PB Amir, which was, secondary. Our company XO was commanding that one, and I wouldn't say the load got any lighter, but it got different. Being a machine gunner by trade, they ran convoys out of there, so my workload got heavier. Now, opposed to just post and foot patrols, I had to be ready to run resupplies, and different types of anything to do with an upgun. They had Mark 19, which can be a complicated weapon system, and being trained on it, they obviously wanted the person trained on it to be on it. So I got called out all the time for that. That being said, I had one or two drivers. One was my off-roading buddy. I trust him with my life when it came to driving. He didn't believe in the speed limits that we were given. My opinion, those type of rules are setting us up to fail. It allows our enemy to know how fast we're allowed to travel. He would frequently just ignore them, get his ass chewed. I mean, ass chewing's happened all the time, but you're not going to get rid of somebody. We were company in a battalion-sized AO. We were short on manpower. Even before we deployed, we lost an entire squad of guys to NJPs and administrative separations. And then, our AO kept expanding. So, I got to be picky with my driver, and both of which were good friends and lippy, and didn't take any extra risk, despite getting their ass chewed. So that was comforting. But when you start running, 2-3 weeks off of 2 hours of sleep or little limited naps, things get tough. And it boiled down to the point where I went into the where the doc had all of his stuff set up, and I was like, "Doc, my feet are feeling a little bad." He looked, I had the worst ingrown nail in my life. He basically numbed me up and started cutting it out right there. I don't know what he gave me, but I was knocked out for 20 hours, and he basically told my squad leader I'm out of commission, and that was the best rest I've ever got. Me and Doc Harp got along great. I reach out to him every once in a while still, but I really got to see what he was like. We had one vehicle-borne IED in our entire AO during our entire deployment. So happened to be at the Bazaar location, which was 300-400 meters outside of PB Amir when I was stationed there. little motorcycle, C4 ball bearings or homemade explosive with ball bearings, went off during a busy bazaar day. That was my first experience with mass casualty. Um, just hard. Doc went to work. I now understand how he was able to do that, but and we all did. Nobody froze, nobody choked. There's a job to be done, but looking back at it, learning how to process all of it, and from the initial explosion to reacting with our QRF to cleaning up bodies to calling in helos, it was chaos, and it's something you'll never forget. And I wouldn't want anybody to experience it ever. It's the sights, the sounds, the smells, everything just it stays with you. Um, and I mean, as I said, we only had one in our whole one vehicle-borne IED in our whole AO that I'm aware of. I'm glad it was only one, but one's too many. Um, from there, that was when things started to actually taper off in our area. We by this time we'd rolled up weapon smugglers, money smugglers, drug growers, bomb makers, all this other stuff. And we had a pretty passive AO. I'm not going to say I slept soundly at night. I mean, it was, always on call, always on alert, still never trusting anybody. The kids were miserable the entire time we were over there. They were notorious with their slings and throwing mud, which, like, if you think David and Goliath sling, that type of sling, but those mud balls could have rocks in them, and they could hit us from 30, 40 feet away, and we couldn't do shit about it. And they weren't scared of anything. They weren't scared of us. They knew our ROEs. But those same kids that would pelt us on post or on patrol with those or anything like that, they'd come up to our post as close as they could. We had, at this point, we did have ESCO barriers and concertina wire and all that set up for our defensive position, but they'd come up asking for candy and chocolate and pens and all this other stuff. So it you couldn't trust them. They would hurt you 1 second, and these are their kids. This is the culture they're brought up in, and I mean, it really makes it difficult when you live your life day in day out for that extended period of time, not trusting anybody to ever be able to build trust with anybody. And I mean that later in life, even now, that still affects me. Even though I'm cognizant of it, it still creates boundaries and speed bumps and issues in my current life. But we kind of, as the activity our AO dialed down, we did more outreach, more, I don't want to call it humanitarian, but more, velvet glove, get them to love us type of thing. One thing I was part of was a bats and hide system, fingerprint and iris scanner, would allow us to print badges for the local population, which were going, our command at one point thought that they would be good to have. You have to have a badge to go into the bazaar. Obviously, that's not doable. We gave them out for free. People were happy to have something with their picture on it. So I was doing that along with my truck patrols, foot patrols, and stand and post. I got to know some of the locals through that and their background. One guy actually, he studied in the United States, came back over, and he's back home. Some of the one of the other farmers in their area, we didn't meet him personally until about 3.5 months in. This older gentleman, when we finally met him, we asked why the Taliban left him alone, and he gestured us into his home. And this was, just having tea in the middle of the day like this. Even at that time, people were very skeptical to talk to us like that. But he gestured us in, and above his door stood an AK. And he, in his own way, basically told us that Taliban were punks and he was old school Mujahideen. He fought the Russian. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was okay with it. And last time they came to him, he said, "You might kill me, but how many can I take out before you get me?" So, I mean, people from different backgrounds from that, and it was truly amazing to see, looking back, to see the cultural difference and the highlights of it. Now, the evils that were present, it never balanced out. Um, it never really did. And then, before we knew it, we're getting, well, before we left, Richard Moore, my machine gunner buddy, he had a medical issue. He was at a different patrol base, and he was flown out. Um, Staff sergeant that was in charge of him patrolled back to our uh, PB for a kind of resupply. We had the sat phone that everybody could come and use, so let his squad use that. And he told me to pack Richard shit or more shit. And at this point in our deployment, that usually meant somebody died. By this time, we had lost a dog, bomb sniffing dog, which sent obviously the dog to the better life, the other side, and the sweeper in front of him sent him home due to the concussive blast, and the dog handler. And then we also had an incident with IAD where Doc Wood got blown up. So we dealt with a couple losses by this time, and so being told to pack up my best friend's shit, and I mean, my first question, what's going on with Richard? Like, my mom sending him cake in a jar. So for about a week there, I thought he died or it was severely injured. Turned out it was just a medical condition where he had to get flown out immediately and get treatment in Germany. So Doc Wood was our first casualty while we were in country. And that was another very real moment for us. I wasn't with him. I do have the accounts, first-hand accounts of people that were, but I mean, he was part of our company. He was a good friend. He was a brother. I guess the way the story went is sweeper went over a bridge. Doghound, sorry, that's a different one. He ended up getting blown up. Just IAD, legs blown off. I don't know if it was above or below the knees, but it was bad. He remained conscious, which was the beautiful part about it, because he was talking his squad through applying tourniquets and putting pressure in the right place, and they did everything right. And the fact that he was trying to keep his fellow squad mates from going into shock, whether he was in shock or not, I mean, that's for nobody can really tell, but the fact that his training and his making sure his guys knew what to do, that was the most important thing to him at the time. Obviously it was to save his own life, but do it right. And they ended up stabilizing him, calling in Mercy Air, which is how we helo evac people. And for science reasons, I guess, elevation change, whatever, who knows, he was lost during that flight due to blood loss or whatever it may be. I mean, double amputation is not something easy. It's not something you can really expect to get away from. And that hit the company hard. It happened earlier in the deployment, and we had a memorial service for him at PB Amir, and we were down there for that one. And this is before I even had a chance to call home. The calls home were rare. We just didn't have time. And when we did have time, the battery was low on the sat phone. One sat phone to share through 100 guys. I mean, it's hard to find time, but there was a camera crew there for the memorial service. I think they did a great job right up until they started sticking the camera in everybody's face. And it was the first time my mom had heard from me or seen me since I deployed. And she got to see me in a mental break. well, not a full-fledged mental break, but an emotional breakdown. You know, you lose a brother, and it's you're honored that you know them, but it's hard to realize that you lost them. And being part of that service, even now, like I don't need to know any service member, but if I see a service going on, it hurts at different levels. Um, but dog would definitely hurt the most for me. It's the first one I experienced, and he really, I mean, Navy corpsman, but every Marine's favorite, every grunt's best friend is Doc, and that held true. Um, it I mean, any thought of being complacent was immediately abolished after that. The hardest part was dealing with the rage, the local community towards the local community. Not all of them deserved it. Maybe none of them deserved it. So you had to really push all that down and get through that. Just do your job while your best friend is in a morgue somewhere, getting buried somewhere. And we used to say that nobody was innocent, and I still believe that. With how when you understand that culture, everybody talks, everybody knows somebody that's doing something wrong. Even one time we rolled this kid up, and you know their Pashtuwali code, and you know their what we were taught they believed was a load of bullshit. They said they would family above all else. Essentially, they would never sell each other out. Well, we rolled this one kid up for drug smuggling, and he said, "No, you don't want me. You want my dad. He runs guns." And so we rolled the dad up too. And dad said, "No, you don't want me. You want my dad. He's doing XYZ." We rolled him up too. Their family rolled on each other. But everybody knew, even the innocent farmer that was growing corn, doing everything right, he knew who was doing something wrong. And by not saying anything, that's level of guilt. So it was really hard to suppress that rage. But we all worked through it in our own ways. And I mean, Doc Wood, you'll never forget your first, is what corpsmen say, talking to each other when they lose their first soldier, Marine, whomever it may be that they're working on. But, everybody that's lost somebody, I'd say the first one hits the hardest. It hits like after losing multiple friends, I'd say the first one hits 10 times harder than the second or the third. It doesn't make them any easier, but it definitely hits you in a different way. So, and then, I mean, kind of summarizing the entire deployment, we had a lot less losses than our CAP platoon, our weapons company platoon, but I'd say we were lucky. So many of us made it out. We weren't necessarily put in terrible situations. We weren't put in great situations either, but I mean, I'm grateful for everybody that made it out of there physically intact. It's hard to say that everybody made it out there intact because everybody suffers in their own way. But after that, just we had the love of the people. We had the Afghan National Army helping us out. They implemented the Afghan National Police. There was one of them ended up being, I mean, he was a police officer, but he ended up stealing from the police. And supposedly, you can only assume that when they take night vision goggles and rifles that we issued them, and so on and so forth, probably handed them over to our opposition. So that kind of felt like catch and release at some points when it came to the people that we were rolling up. Because later in our deployment, we would start rolling up the same people that we rolled up early in the deployment, doing the same thing, because they would be sentenced to 3 months up in jail in Kabul, which is nothing. And then they get out and keep doing it because they get a slap on the wrist. So it really kind of started feeling like catch and release by the end of it. And I wish I could have done more when I was over there. I did the job I was given. I'd like to think I did the best job I possibly could, and that met the requirements. But after 7 months of barely showering and dealing with unbearable heat to unbearable cold at night, we were told we were going home. And as much as I left that place, I wouldn't say that place left me. Um, but it was a hell of a homecoming. Ended up flying up to Germany, or Kyrgyzstan to Germany, commercial flight from Germany over, and during that flight, the layover up in Germany, we were allowed to get out, and everybody had as much beer as they could drink, um, and when we got on the plane, pilots, they came over to the intercom. 2010, I'd say patriotism was still alive, a lot more so than it is now, in my opinion. And they were grateful. They gave their little speech, and the stewardess walked down with the bottles of alcohol they bought for all the guys coming home. But it wasn't all of us. And it's been said before, maybe they were the lucky ones, but it's really hard to um, come back, because you don't. It's not a. It's not a grocery store. You don't just close it at night and walk away. It's you take things back, and the culture of coming home was you don't talk about it. You don't want to show your weakness even to your best of friends. You you come home and people want to talk about all the atrocities and they want to know all the disgusting things that happened over there, but it makes you question whether you stoop down to the level of evil that you had to witness. So until recently, I never talked about my time overseas, and when I first did, it was only with the guys I was with, and even then, it isn't easy. Um, and we all have different memories of the same situation. We all have different perspectives of how things went down, but the bottom line truth is all the same. So, I mean, we came home, and shortly thereafter picked up new Marines, started training again. I mean, get ready, that's part of the job. You do a deployment and then get ready for the next one. So that's kind of where we went from there. So second deployment, we had a training accident where we lost another corpsman. Won't dive into that one too much, but it's something else I had to deal with later in life now, or unpack, I should say. I don't want to say deal with. Um, and then time came for my end of service. I did my 5 years. I had a 5x3 contract, but I did my 5 years. I got out, and it was interesting. I was married at this time. First kid was on her way, and you know it was the transition at the time. They just started the program, the TRS program, in its infancy, where it was 2 weeks of trying to transition out of the military. Um, and it all just talked about getting into the job force, basically how to make a resume, how to carry yourself. But it did a terrible job at any part of reintegration. If anything, I'd say it was detrimental. Uh, it set a level of expectations of me that was not realistic, in the negative sense. Um, it so when I went through the program, checked out of my unit, all that other stuff, got out, drove home, San Diego to Seattle, and from there, I started a new life up here. I took the first job I could, which happened to be at a call center. It was fitting. Going from the Marine Corps and getting yelled at to a call center and getting yelled at was very accommodating, and it felt natural to me. That's the weird part. It it felt like home. I had no interaction with necessarily coworkers on a small team, but I mean, just getting yelled at customers, I felt at peace with that. When things were calm, my life was chaos. When my life was chaos, I was calm. Um, and during that time, self-medicating, uh, and I mean, it's called self-medicating with the sense of trying to help you get through things. But what I was actually doing was burying everything, um, and that went on for quite a while. I ended up, quit self-medicating. My relationship, when I quit self-medicating, actually closed off, and um, I call it icing people, but basically just being so closed off. You're not pushing them away, but you're not allowing them to be close either. And that wasn't just my marriage. That was everybody in my life, my family, my friends, everybody. I was at a job that didn't require me to interact as a team, and so it kind of it was acceptable for me because I didn't know what transitioning was supposed to be like. So this was normal. I didn't bother to address any of my issues for the first 8 months, and I went to the VA and tried to, and that was just a brick wall at the time. And so I continued with my life, work as hard as I can, make as much money as I can, provide for my family at home. First kid comes, everything's fine, but getting more and more distance between me and my ex-wife. We ended up having a second child, and that's when the reality of what I've been doing came out. I had no connection with my first daughter. Now I'm having a second one. I have zero to no connection with my in-laws whatsoever. And ex-wife is feeling that, so I'm getting more distant from her. Don't have any connection with my own family that around here. And it it wasn't until 7, 8 years after I got out that I actually started really reflecting on the damages that I hadn't addressed. And during that time, I mean, so much social harm in my life. But what ended up bringing it all back is there was an accident on the freeway. I was the first person on scene, and it was what is now called a trigger event. Didn't know that term before. That took me to the emergency room, the VA, and they waved me off and sent me up to mental health. Didn't have an appointment, and it was very difficult. I was able to talk to somebody that day. I ended up getting an appointment with a counselor, but that's when my issues really came out of what everything I brought home and hadn't dealt with came to. From there, I've been on an up and down journey of getting treatment from licensed doctors to helping myself. I spent the summer of 2022 basically in a national park, as much as I could outside of cell phone service, just me and my dog, and really rediscovering who I am and what I stand for, and understanding that these what I viewed as burdens in the past aren't that. There's something different. I can't even put it in words, but it's part of who sculpted me, and I can't let it hold me back. And it's an interesting journey, and I don't know if it will ever be over. The challenges, as I said, you bring some of that home with you. Whether you get rid of it all or not is, I don't want to say up to the individual, but it's individual based. I don't think no amount of medication is going to solve my problems. No amount of treatment is going to solve my problems. No amount of self-reflection is going to solve my problems. But it's on me to find a balance of I call them problems, but it's on me to find the balance of those problems and life balance in order to really move forward and be successful going forward. And I've come to the terms that I can't rely on anybody to do it for me. It's on me, and it's another challenge. I'd say it's probably the next big challenge in my life, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. And so far, so good. I mean, a lot better. I'm happy to talk about my experience, but maybe we'll see what happens here in the next couple of years. Maybe it'll cured, but I really want is if I can help anybody, that's the goal. Helping other people also helps myself. So that's why I chose to come here today and kind of tell my story.